Welcome to Relationship Nation with Freddie and Wayne Martin. I'm Freddie.
And I'm Wayne.
So today we're going to talk about establishing boundaries in a relationship. Wayne, why is it important to have boundaries?
Well, let's talk about different types of boundaries that you want to establish. So, when you first start dating, it's really important to establish um, boundaries around meeting, what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, maybe time frames, how you're going to meet, where you're going to meet, all those things. That's a great place to start with. And we're going to start there. But first of all, when you're establishing your boundaries, it's really important to know that it's by setting boundaries, you're protecting yourself from hurt emotionally and physically. So a lot of times you get into relationships and you're just moving along and you're morphing yourself, you're not authentic, uh, being with that other person because you haven't established boundaries. And it takes some courage to do that at times.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really important is that it builds trust, respect, and safety, like we talked about. Clear communication is very important. It creates standards and it allows you to tell you what your needs are clearly. The other thing that helps bring your self-identity forward, your authenticity, and that's super important as you're going along in a long-term relationship. The other thing is there's a lot less stress because there's not all these unmet concerns because they're clear, and it actually brings joy in the relationship. It'll bring growth in the relationship and ultimately love if you decide to keep going on because your standards and everything that you need within that relationship is flowing along better with clear communication.
Yeah, it's important, and sometimes it's really uncomfortable establishing boundaries because, like in my case, as a child, I was raised in a kind of fairly dysfunctional family, and so there weren't a lot of boundaries, and my whole way of being was just be invisible or be pleasing, and that's a difficult thing because for me, when I got into my marriages, I didn't establish any boundaries. I was just like whatever they wanted to do, all that. And what happens is it creates tremendous amount of anger and you don't feel loved. And it's also important that you create boundaries, like when you're creating your boundaries, that you with your partner or the person that you think could be a potential partner is to ask them what's their standards, what are their boundaries, what are their likes and dislikes, what are their goes and no's and no goes or goes and no goes. And like for instance, was dating a man after my third divorce, and we had a good relationship, and we had a lot of fun together. We enjoyed each other. He had three boys that he was pretty much the primary care for, and they were old enough to be left alone at night. But before that, he would help them with their homework, get them fed, get them in bed, and then he would come over to my house. Well, the problem is that I have always gone to bed at 9 o'clock, like my entire life. I went on the senior sneak and we were supposed to stay up 24 hours. I was on the couch sleeping because that's just the way it is. My body, it just can't stay up. So by the time he got the kids done and in bed, it would be 9 o'clock. And he'd show up to my house at then, and I'd be hinting, which is a really poor way to establish boundaries. I didn't just say, hey, don't come over if you're going to come over at 9 o'clock because I am already half asleep. So I would yawn, make all kinds of hints about it and stuff like that. But I never said, don't come over, let's just see each on their weekends when the kids are with their mom, or sometime when we can have this an earlier relationship. So ultimately what happened is I ended up thinking he was such a jackass. I just thought why doesn't he take my hints? Why he doesn't care about me? I'm not important to him. And so I broke up with him. Now, in retrospect, since we learned about boundaries, if I would have established boundaries and said those things, then there's a good chance that, especially if he appreciated my boundaries and if he shared with me his boundaries, whatever they were, then we might have had a chance on that relationship because we get along really well. It was just that one thing, and I just blew it up into this like he's a terrible person, blah 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 blah. And that's why it's so important to have boundaries, because you can wreck the relationship by not establishing your boundaries because of resentment.
Right. And it's not really gender specific either.
No, it
It's
is
more
not.
about how you grow up. I grew up in a family that was very boundaryless, great people. We give our shirt off our back. We had an open door policy. Hey, come on over anytime. But as we, as I grew up, let's say, and got out in the world, that wasn't really serving my relationship. It pretty much helped to create a lot of problems in my first marriage because I would say that my mom was very helpful. She didn't have a lot of boundaries, so she was always interjecting herself into things with the children, and that didn't please my first wife unless she was asked. And if she was asked, it would probably be okay. But she was never asked, and so no boundaries were ever established, and that was a problem.
It creates a lot of resentment.
Creates a lot of resentment, and it filters into your relationship. And it certainly wasn't the thing that ended our relationship, but it certainly didn't help in a day-to-day life that we have. So establishing boundaries from the beginning and learning how to do it in a way that is clear, it's not personal, it's just what you need, and then really asking your partner, what are their needs? What are their standards? I know for Freddie and I, when we first got together, we talked about how she had abandonment issues and how important it was for me to let her know if I was going to work late. Well, I was used to just working till the job was done, and that was just part of me, working for the family. Just part of it. It's almost like for men, sometimes it's almost like a hero thing, or you just get so absorbed. I'm a little bit ADD, and so when I do focus, I hyper focus and just go. But that was really a problem for Freddie until she let me know, and then I'd say, oh, hey, I text or call, let her know that, hey, it's going to be 15 minutes. It's going to be whatever it's going to be. But I started learning about getting ahead of a situation in our relationship because I knew it was important to her.
Yeah.
And it was more important that our relationship, grow and become even better. We didn't need to overcome that portion because now I knew, and she was clear about it.
And what happens, because for your entire relationship, you're going to be reestablishing boundaries because you change, you get older, stuff happens, kids move out, all that kind of stuff. You have parents that get sick. There are so many different ways that you have to establish your boundaries. So it's very important in your relationship that you have a clear communication with each other, that you have permission to be able to communicate. Because just like the other night, we went out to dinner with a group of a club that we belong to, and it's like this whole room full of people having dinner. And I had just recently gone on this cleanse, so there were very specific foods that I could not eat. And for me, that's a very private thing. Well, Wayne, being with the guys talk about everything. They talk about all the medications they're taking. They talk about everything.
For instance, we have a get-together of a number of us guys, and at our age, we start talking about, hey, what drug are you taking? What did your doctor do? Where do you get it? And all this stuff, and what's your ailment, and how you dealing with it, and this and that. It's kind of funny, but that's our tribe, that's our group, and I forgot that not everybody is like that. And we have a pretty open relationship, so we talk all the time, no big deal. But it was just kind of a mistake. It was a mistake on my part.
Here we are at the thing, and in front of the entire place, everybody.
I didn't shout it out.
Well, everybody heard though, and I was
pissed.
Upset.
Let's be clear.
Pissed.
You were pissed.
Because he goes, oh, Freddie's on this cleanse, and so she can't. And I'm just going, I just want to reach over and just punch him right in the face. So afterwards, because we know how to establish boundaries now because of all the work we've done learning how to do that. Is that afterwards I said, yeah, that's not okay.
And I felt really bad.
That's a no-go for
That
me.
was a no-go.
No, you can talk about all your aches and pains and everything you're doing because that's your personal business, and that's if that doesn't matter to you, but to me, it's private. So we're just talking about. You will be establishing boundaries throughout your entire relationship.
All the time.
All the time. It's really important when you first start dating somebody that you do establish those boundaries, because what happens is that you have all of these, like especially if you have that chemistry between you and you're just like so attracted, well, you have a tendency to overlook a whole bunch of stuff then, because you're just like, oh, this is the one I'm so in love.
Oh yeah, in the beginning when you have that chemistry, it's like cocaine and heroin. It's like, woo, it's so exciting. And you know, what happens is it disengages your frontal cortex that establishes logic. You lose self-awareness to a certain extent. And so it's a real dangerous time.
It is.
It really is, because how many times in your life have you ever been loved like that? And so, or have that connection, not necessarily love at this point, but just that connection and that chemical rush, and wow, it's so fantastic. And a lot of your standards go out the window.
Absolutely.
It's like,
oh, he's an hour late for our date. Oh, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
He had to work late. Stuff like that. So it's very important that you go in and do your best to use your frontal cortex and have it very established that you know that these are your boundaries. This is what your expectations are. This is so, like if he's an hour late and your boundary is that he needs to call you or let you know way ahead of time or whatever, or she's an hour late, it's not necessarily him, that you have established a boundary right from the get-go, that you need to be told it with enough time for you not to show up to where you guys are going to be meeting. Anyway, that's just one boundary. There are so many boundaries, many boundaries, and that's the thing.
Right. So when you first start dating, I think it's really important, both Freddie and I talked about this, that we have another talk that's called the love funnel. It's about the love funnel, and that's how you create your dating profile, how you start talking to the people that you're interacting with, but you start setting your boundaries at that point.
Yes.
You know, how are you going to meet? How long you're going to meet? And that it's not personal. It's just a way to systematically go through this dating progression so that it's working for you, so you can build trust, safety. The person's not guessing. And
that's a guessing thing.
It's the guessing. It's all these unmet needs that you have or they have. Why not kind of bring them out on the table? You don't have to be hardcore and
give them a list.
Give them a list, but you know, you definitely want to have certain conversations as you go along, and you'll end up, you know, having a better relationship. Like for instance, if I was out on the dating scene, I would ask permission. I would use different language just because I want to be very, very respectful. I want to create safety and comfort for that other person, and to be clear about, you know, what's going to happen possibly at our first meeting. Well, maybe we're going to agree that we're going to spend only a half hour together. And that's going to be a standard and a boundary. And then at the end of that, nothing personal. If we don't have the chemistry, you know, is it okay just to be friends? And, you know, that might be a good referral person for you, because you never know. You might need to meet 20 people, or you just don't know what's going to happen. But it's a way to establish comfort and safety as you're going along, and not have unmet expectations.
Yeah. So in the final part of this, let's just say that it's really important for you to sit down and analyze for yourself, what are the real boundaries for you? What are your no-goes, your goes, no-goes? Like, no, if somebody shows up at your door without letting you know, I'll slam a door in their face. that's my no-go. So that's one of my real boundaries. So it's important for you to examine yourself, do self-examination, go, okay, what are my no-goes? What are the things that I have absolute boundaries around that? So you know going in that you have the opportunity to share that with the person that you're interested in, and then ask them, would you please think about what your boundaries are? Because maybe you were raised in a boundaryless family like both Wayne and I were, and you don't even know what that word means. So it's very important, and that's pretty much it we're talking about.
Yeah, so start working on your boundaries. And the last point that I'd like to make is there's certain boundaries that people are not going to understand if they haven't grown up in a family or in a situation where they develop boundaries. Doesn't mean that they can't.
They
So
can,
you
right?
can cut a little bit of slack here and there,
Mhm.
but how you help them is just being gentle and empathetic, but being clear. And so that will help you in the dating relationship and definitely as you move along into a long-term relationship. So we hope that helps. Check out some of our other podcasts and videos, and we'll see you soon.